عبده وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تمسك بسنته إلى يوم الدين وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. We continue February the 15th. February the 15th, everyone. February the 15th, 7:35 p.m. 2019. I'm about to say 2015, 2019, which is Friday night, which agrees on the Hijri count, which is Jumad al-Thani, which is the 11th of Jumad al-Thani, 1440 after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wasalam. We continue in kitaab-attawheed as we began the new chapter. And the new chapter, you'll find, is in direct correlation with the previous one. As we talked about, it keeps turning. All right, let me fix it. Oh, that's the reason. As you'll find, like we said, it's connected with direct correlation with the previous chapter. Like we said, these chapters are very important because it is the fitna, or the trials and tribulation that this ummah has been put to test by. It's the fitna of graves and the worshipping of the dead, especially in the beliefs of superstitions and myths and omens and all those other different affairs of jahiliyyah that has plagued the Muslims all throughout the world due to their lack of understanding, of these matters which we're discussing now, and likewise, or either for them following their desires from those ulama as-su, from those evil scholars that have led them astray. But these chapters, like we said, are of the utmost importance for one to understand. Like we said, for brothers and sisters, this is the fitna of the ummah all around the world, of the Muslims. You'll find that they've been put to trial and test by the fitna of pictures and images as far as regards to the righteous, and how Shaitan utilized this method of carving or putting in the images or statues of those people who are righteous, and as a result of it, it led down the road of polytheism or paganism and idolatry and the likes of that. So the chapter, like we said, keep in mind what we memorized previously, as it says in the chapter before, that the reason for the kufr, or the disbelief of Bani Adam, and them leaving off their religion, is because, number one, keep in mind, was extremism. And we said that word ghulu, al-ghulu fi salihin, that ghulu is all those different types. It doesn't matter whether it's in the aspect of the affair of aqidah and the belief system or the creed, or in the affairs of ibadah, or the affairs of mu'amalat or transactions. The shaitan comes to the heart of one of us, or all of us, all of us. You'll find that Shaykh al-Islam even said a profound statement. He said that shaitan, that Iblis himself, that he comes to the heart of one of us and he smells it. He comes to our heart and he smells it. And he sees what is the weakness of the abd, what is the weakness of the servant. What's he inclined towards? Is he inclined towards extremism, or is he inclined towards negligence? Is he inclined towards one of those matters? The shaitan doesn't care whether or not, if you want to say, if you give it out, if he casts you out from the front of the house or the back of the house, the most important thing is that you get out. So shaitan utilizes every type of wasila, every type of method and means for the abd, or for the servant, to deviate and to go astray. And like we said, it doesn't matter. He will come at you from either the affair of ghulu or the affair of jafa. He will either come at you for the aspect of extremism, or he will come at you of the affair of negligence, of being too lax and lackadaisical. Starting with your belief system. You start with that. Then he'll work his way down. If you can allow one to fall into extremism, like we said in the affair of starting with the affair of belief and conviction and creed, and if he's not able to make the abd, or the servant, fall into extremism or negligence in that affair, then he moves on to something else to make you fall into either extremism or negligence in the affairs of ibadah. And then he moves on the ladder, and then he goes down and down, as Ibn al-Qayyim that you'll find that he mentions. The shaitan always wants to have his portion of some type of affair of the abd, of the children of Bani Adam. And like we said, he starts off with the most evil matters and the most wicked of them, and the most evil of them, which is trying to corrupt his belief system. So shaitan aims at trying to corrupt the belief system of Bani Adam. And then he works his way down the ladder if he's not able to do the head of all matters, which is considered the most wicked, which is deviance in the belief system of the ibad, or the children of Adam. Then he goes down the ladder. So like we said, the first chapter that we concluded, or we finalized, we explained, we said that the reason for why the children of Adam, number one, that they fell into kufr and leaving off the true religion was extremism in regards to the righteous. Also now, this chapter that we basically started on adds on and gives more clarification of also from the plots of shaitan. It's also from considered what they call hiyal iblisiyah, the iblis methods and ways. As you'll find, like we talked about, brothers and sisters, we said that the sunnah or the evil sunnah of grave worship, we can say evil sunnah, because the Messenger of Allah said that. There's a hadith of the Prophet he said, "Man sanna fil Islam sunnatan sayyi'ah, falahu wizru fa'alayhi wizruha wa wizru man amila biha ila yawm al-qiyamah." There's a narration where the Prophet said, whoever brings forth or makes an evil sunnah, then upon him or against him will be the sin of it and the sin of the one who follows him all the way up to the day of resurrection. Now, so the affairs of evil and starting evil in this religion and having the people fall behind it is a very, very evil, wicked matter, to the point not only does one attain the sin of starting that newly invented matter or that evil, but even the people who follow you in that matter, you have the sins of them also likewise. As the Messenger of Allah clearly mentioned. And that's also the origin of it does go back to the book of Allah in Surah An-Nahl. In Surah An-Nahl, the Surah of the bees. Allah Ta'ala says, لِيَحْمِلَ أَوْزَارَهُمْ كَامِلَةً يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَمِنْ أَوْزَارِ الَّذِينَ يُضِلُّونَهُم بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَزِرُونَ. As Allah Ta'ala says, لِيَحْمِلُ أَوْزَارَهُمْ كَامِلَةً يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَمِنْ أَوْزَارِ الَّذِينَ يُضِلُّونَهُم بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. There's an ayah where Allah Ta'ala says, Surah An-Nahl, I can't remember the number right now, if I give it to everyone after the class. He says in Surah An-Nahl, he says, let them carry the sins of themselves and the sins of those who follow them, the sins of those also who they misled from the people. So not only do they carry the sins of themselves for starting the evil sunnah, but the sins of those who follow them in that, they carry the burden of their sins likewise. So that's tremendous. And likewise, the Messenger of Allah also said the opposite. من سن في الإسلام سنة حسنة فله أجرها وأجر من عمل بها إلى يوم القيامة. And likewise, who starts a good sunnah, meaning the sunnah of what has already been affirmed and established in the kitab-sunnah, then he will have the reward and the reward of the one who follows him all the way up to the day of resurrection. But the evil sunnah of what was started in the religion, as far as what was considered a wasila or methods to one falling into paganism or idolatry, what was considered a method of falling into that was the fitna of graves and grave worshiping, or building different types of structures or domes, or not even that, but even praying in its vicinity, where in front of the grave or next to a grave, or performing a righteous act next to it, in front of it, or what have you, which we'll discuss again, inshallah. But all that fitna was started, as we know, number one, by the people of the book, as the Messenger of Allah ﷺ clearly explained in the narrations that we're going to say, or that we're going to mention, inshallah. So the fitna of grave worshiping and polytheism coming as a result of it, all was started by the people of the book. So evil to the point where you would think that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ would have busied himself with something else, because the affairs of what we're going to speak about happened at the time of where he was about to die, alayhi salatu wasalam. So you think that he would be busy with making dhikr of Allah Ta'ala, which he did, no doubt. But however, he still talked about this affair of Tawheed and wanted to get shirk, even at his deathbed. To let you know the importance of it, and one of the ways of how it took place in this ummah was from what? Was from the people taking the qubur of the anbiya as masajid, taking the graves of their prophets and messengers as masajid. And like we talked about, this happened at the time of his death, alayhi salatu wasalam, when the angel of death was about to take his soul. The Messenger of Allah was still calling to Tawheed and wanting to get shirk. even at the time of his death. عليه الصلاة والسلام. فالنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عند الاحتضار عند حصول الموت وهو يدعو إلى التوحيد ويحذر من الشرك. You would think that he was busying himself with something else, but he still was what? Calling to monotheism and warning against polytheism. And he's saying that what happened to this ummah, not only did he said in the narration, he said, لَعْنَ اللَّهُ الْيَهُودَ وَالنَّصَارَى اتَّخَذُوا قُبُورَ أَنْبِيَائِهِمْ مَسَاجِدَ. He said that the curse of Allah be upon the Jews and the Christians. They took the grave of their prophets as what? As masajid. So at the time of his death, he's still calling to monotheism and the unification of Allah's worship. And he was what? Warning against polytheism and paganism and idolatry. Even at his deathbed, alayhi salatu wasalam, at the time where the angel of death was coming to take his soul, alayhi salatu wasalam. So, we said that the fitna of qubur, or ibadat al-qubur, or al-amwat, the fitna of worshipping the dead, worshipping graves, that this fitna started with the people of the book, started with the Jews and the Christians. Then it had passed on to the Muslims, and the first people, as Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah mentioned his book, Minhaj al-Sunnah. He said, أول من سن هذه السنة السيئة هم الشيعة الفاطميون. هم أول من سن هذه السنة السيئة. سنة ألا وهي سنة عبادة القبور والأموات. So you'll find in Shaykh al-Islam that he said that the first of those who started this evil sunnah was the sunnah of who? Of the Shia, from the deviant sects al-Fatimiyun. And with Shaykh al-Islam has a book called Minhaj al-Sunnah. That book is a refutation and rebuttal against the Shia. You'll find that he said that the Shia al-Fatimiyun from them. This is a deviant sect from the Shia called al-Fatimiyun. They were the first ones who started the worship of graves. They're the one that started the worship of graves. He says, then تبنى هذه العقائد السيئة المفسدة الصوفية أخذوها من الشيعة. He said, then after that you'll find that those from who came and took that evil sunnah from them was the Sufis. So like we talked about on many occasions, we said that the Sufis فيهم الرفض. Keep that in mind. That the Shia, that the Sufiya, that they have the ways of a Shia or Rafidiyya in them. Because like we talked about and I discussed, I think about a month ago, maybe a couple of months or what have you, approximately, we said that the fitna of grave worshiping started, as far as the Muslims, with the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu, that it started with the Shia. It started with the Shia al-Fatimiyun. They're the first one that started this evil sunnah. Then, like we said, the ones who adopted it from the other deviant sects, from the Sufiya. They're the ones that took that evil sunnah and started to put it to practice. So we said, Ya ma'ash al-ikhwa, as far as in regards to this chapter is also very important. Where it says at the title, Ba ma ja'a fi at-taghlid fi ma... As it comes in the chapter, it says, Babun ma ja'a fi at-taghlid في من عبد الله عند قبر رجل صالح فكيف إذا عبده. He said the chapter which comes in the severity of the one who worships Allah by the grave of a righteous individual, a righteous man. He says, if that's the case of how severe that is, then what if he actually worships him? As we're going to talk about the narrations, because the here is talking about that affair is evil. Not the fact that the people actually fell into shirk, but the people who built the wasila to shirk. The people who actually started the method for the people falling into it. How you'll find in the narration, which we'll discuss, that they were considered the most evil of creation. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أُولَٰئِكَ شِرَارُ الْخَلْقِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. It's a narration, if you look in your books, it's going to come, inshaAllah. He says, أُولَٰئِكَ إِذَا مَاتَ فِيهِمْ الرَّجُلُ الصَّالِحِ وَالَّا عَبْدُ الصَّالِحِ بنوا على قبره مسجد ألا وهم شرار الخلق عند الله يوم القيامة. As we're going to discuss, all these narrations are going to come inshallah. So you'll find that the great Imam in his absolute precise fiqh and understanding of these narrations, he's saying the severity of the one who worships Allah. So he's saying here something that's of Tawheed. If you look in the chapter, what does it say in the title? It doesn't say worships other than Allah. He said the severity of the one who worships Allah by the grave of one righteous. So it didn't say the one who worships other than Allah. He's worshiping Allah. And it says the severity of it. Of the one who worships the grave, worships Allah by the grave of a man who's righteous. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So it's not talking about him making shirk. He's doing something of what? Tawheed. And despite of that, there's still a severity in what? This matter which the great Imam was bringing awareness to and warning to this matter, how severe it is. Then he says, so how much so if he actually worships the individual? So a person, the severity of the one who worships Allah by the grave of one who's righteous, he's considered from the evilest and the most wicked of creation. Then what about if the person actually worships him? Why is that person considered the most evil of creation? We'll discuss it, inshallah. Because it's from the most detrimental of matters and the most tremendous as far as in its magnitude of evils that you create a method or a way for the people to fall into major polytheism. That you open up the door or you create a method or a way for them to inevitably fall into what? Polytheism. Those people are wicked and evil. And also likewise the narration that's going to come in the chapter where the Prophet also said, Inna shirar al-khalq shirar al-nas yawm al-qiyamah. Inna min shirar al-nas man tudrikum as-sa'a wa hum ahya' walladhina ittakhadhu qubur anbiya'ihim masajid. It's all going to come. He said the most evil of creation is those who the day of resurrection or the hour will reach them, or they will reach the hour when the day of resurrection is about to be established and they will be alive. Because we know, ya ma'ashal ikhwa, that there will be no more monotheism left on the earth. So it'll be all people to what? Polytheism and wickedness and evil. And the Prophet ﷺ said in the last part of the narration, which is in your books, that I'm saying now, it's in there. He said, those who take the graves of their prophets as masajid. All those narrations are going to come. We're going to discuss in detail, inshallah. Taib. So the author, as you see, Ma'ashal Ikhwas, it says that number one, we already discussed the warning of extremism, especially in regards to the righteous. That it was a reason for the disbelief of the children of Adam and them leaving off the proper religion and the religion of truth. So the severity now as it comes, as it says, the clarification of how severe this matter is, which we're about discussing in detail. Bab shiddat al-amr, how severe this matter is, of opening up the door of polytheism to the people. Something very, very what? Severe and very evil and wicked. In contrast to now trying to shut the door or close it. You'll find that it says in the title of the great Imam, and he says that the one who worships Allah by the grave of a righteous individual, meaning that he worships Allah tabarak wa ta'ala by supplicating to Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, hoping that his dua will be accepted, by having the belief that that grave has a distinguishing factor about it, which will be a reason for Allah answering his supplication. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? That the person stands by a grave and he's thinking that that person that's dead or the deceased, that the fact that he will be a reason for my dua being answered. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? That individual or that person's from Amwat, that he has a khasiyah, that he has something special and a distinguishing factor about him, that will now be a reason for what? For one supplication being answered by Allah. This is what he's discussing here. Not saying, as we're going to discuss, as I said last class, as far as making dua for the person, that's something that's legislated. But as far as standing by the grave, in order for now to think that as a result of him standing in that particular place, by their grave, or even performing salah, or performing prayer, that it will be a reason for supplication being answered. And like we discussed last class, or a person slaughtering a sacrifice, drawing close to Allah in the grave. All these affairs, ya ma'ashal ikhwa, like we talked about, is what's being discussed here. And it falls into the title of what we're talking about now. For now, we said For a person now to stand at the grave of a person that's righteous, or if a person that's wicked, or a person that's not righteous, that's even more severe. But for a person now that's righteous and he's standing by it, and he performs these acts of worship, having the i'tiqad and the belief that that individual is a reason for Allah answering his dua, then know for sure his belief is based upon something that's what? Corrupt and evil. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? Jay. So that's what we said. This type of way of thinking of the graves, we know, number one, that the graveyards are not places for ibadah. That's number one. We talked about last class that the reason for the graves are for two reasons. Number one, it's just to remind one of death. That's it. Just to remind one of death. To visit the grave of one once for the what? For the remembrance of death. And secondly, to make dua for the deceased. So the dua for what? The person who's died, if he's from the Muslimun, of course. And also there's a dua that's legislative if he passed by the graves that he also makes and gives glad tidings of the hellfire for those who died in the state of kufr. But you'll find, ya ma'ashal ikhwa, that in the beginning of the revelation, the Prophet ﷺ warned the Sahaba in the beginning of going to the graveyards. In the beginning of the revelation. The first part of the revelation was prohibited. It was mamnu'. Why? Out of fear that the affairs of Tawheed were still being what? Be strengthening and becoming what? Concrete and finalized and well deep-rooted in their hearts. Out of fear that it will be a fitna on them, which will lead them down the road of what? Polytheism. So the first part of the revelation, like we said, it was prohibited, highly, out of fear that they will fall into it. Then, the message of Allah sallallahu after the aqidah, the belief of the people became settled and strong, deep-rooted within them, and the monotheism of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala became strong. You'll find that the message of Allah gave permission. After the narration where it says about what happened with his mother. Of what? The message of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, when he wept, and those behind him wept. He says in the narration, كنت أنهاكم عن زيارة القبور فزوروها فإنها تذكر بالآخرة. It says in the narration, where it says, I used to prohibit you from going to the graves. He said, for now visit it, for verily reminds you of the hereafter, reminds you of death. Why did the message of Allah in the first part make it prohibited? Due to the fact that like we said, that the Muslims were put in gradually in stages, especially in the affairs of Aqidah, when it became settled and deep-rooted and strong within themselves. The message of Allah said, I used to prohibit you from doing that, now visit it. To what? For the reason to only remind you of death, remind you of the hereafter. Kuntu anhaakum anil qubur. He said, but however, visit it to remind you of death. That's it. No more, no less. Also, when the message of Allah sallallahu as Imam al-Albani, and I'll bring the narration, which is in kitaab-attawheed. It's in there. I'll bring it next class, inshallah. Just someone remind me, because I have a lot of things on my mind, and I have to be reminded sometimes. But it's a book called Kitab-al-Janaiz by the great Imam al-Albani, rahimahullah. The person says, is it prohibited, as someone asked me, for women to visit the graves? Due to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu he said, لَعَنَ اللَّهُ زُوَّارَاتِ الْقُبُورِ زُوَّارَاتِ الْقُبُورِ. That Allah curses the women who constantly visits the graves. Notice the Messenger of Allah says, Zuwarat, which means they're doing it all the time. They're doing it in abundance. The great Imam al-Albani gave a very excellent explanation in this regard. He said, number one, is it prohibited now that the women visit the graves? He says, what about the prohibitions? Did we take this that the women are not allowed to visit the graves? He said, number one, he said the meaning of the hadith, if it's of fear that the woman, due to the fact that she's not strong and she's weak in her belief system, and she's weak in her aqidah, and she's weak as far as being emotional, that she might do an act that displays discontentment of the divine decree of Allah, whereas she might rip her clothes or smack her cheeks or smack her face or smack her cheeks or scream or holler. It's prohibited. Prohibited. If this fear is here, it's prohibited. Especially if she has some type of wicked belief, thinking that the graves are what? In light of what we just mentioned here. If it's that way, of what we just said a couple of minutes ago, then it's absolutely prohibited. Now, if it's now being safe that the aqidah, the belief system of her, is now not going to be affected, and she's a strong individual, you're not fear that she's going to fall to something prohibited, then she can visit the grave. She can visit it. With the condition that she does not do it consistently at all. However, he says, in regards to the aqidah of the woman, has to be strong, not emotional, and she doesn't do it often. She only does it to what? Make dua for the individual and to remind herself of death, no more, no less. Person would say, what's your dalil? Dalil for that? That was kind of rhetorical, but the father I will go explain in a minute. So, excellent question. I'm going to answer that in a minute. So like we said, what is the dalil? The dalil is when the woman who was by the grave, the woman was by the grave and she was crying. They said, as Imam al-Albani, as he was explaining and saying, when the Messenger of Allah approached her, she didn't know who he was. And she was crying, she was weeping. So the Messenger of Allah said to that, of course, you know, he gave her that advice. He said, Isbiri wa ihtasibi. He said, be patient and contemplate your reward with Allah. And the woman did not know who's behind her. And she basically said to the Messenger of Allah, he said, you don't know what's my situation, you don't know what I'm going through, or what have you. They say that hadith, that the Messenger of Allah, if it was prohibited for her, in that particular instance, he would have prohibited it. He would have said to her, I prohibit you. You're not supposed to be at the graves. Leave. You understand? Leave. The Messenger of Allah allowed her to do that. In that particular instance, when he left, it was informed that he was the Messenger of Allah. So she ran to the Messenger of Allah's house, knocked on the door, and said, Messenger of Allah, I didn't know that was you. I didn't know that was you. The Messenger of Allah said, verily, as-sabr inda awwali sadma. That verily patience is when the true patience manifests when a person firstly hears of the affliction when it first comes to them. That truly shows your patience. That it manifests when you firstly hear about the affliction when it first comes to you. But anyway, that narration I'm going to bring about Imam al-Albani, it's in kitaab-attawheed. He says, how do we gather between all these narrations? You have the narrations of the women who constantly what? That they have been, or it says, لَعْنَ اللَّهُ زُوَارَاتُ الْقُبُورِ. May Allah, Allah curses the women who constantly visit the graves, and these narrations here. How do we combine between them? He said, number one is based upon what we just said. The details are that the woman, if she's not emotional, she's in her right state of mind where she's not going to lose her right state of mind, or she's not going to become emotionally, or emotions are not going to take her over where she's going to do something impermissible as far as displaying some type of discontentment for the divine decree of Allah, where she might beat her cheeks or scream or say something out of her scream something out of her mouth that's something that's not impermissible, showing her discontentment for the qadr of Allah, or even worshiping the dead. Then it's prohibited highly. Not supposed to visit at all, if this is her state. However, like we said, if this fear has now been removed, and like we just mentioned, then she can visit it as long as she does not do it frequently or do it constantly. But only do it for the reasons that we mentioned. Number one, to remind her of death, and just to make dua for the dead. Make dua for them. Make the dua for them by, if you pass by their grave, make it the supplications that the Messenger of Allah legislated. As we know, in passing the graves, there are certain supplications which we're going to discuss, inshallah. I'm going to bring it next class. There are certain supplications that one says when he passes by the graves. And certain supplications about for the mu'mineen, and there's certain supplications for the kafirin. Right. For now, the question is, what we're discussing here is the difference between supplicating to Allah Ta'ala for the deceased, supplicating and asking Allah to forgive them, and having the belief that if you was to worship Allah by the grave, that particular individual is a reason for your dua being answered. It's the difference between those circumstances. From now, what is being discussed here is what? Which one? That a person that he goes to the grave and he's standing by or in front of it, and he's having the belief or the i'tiqad that that dead person has some type of benefit, that he can benefit, whereas if one stands by it or close to it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will what? Answer his supplication as a result of that individual or that deceased being close to him or in front of him. That is what's prohibited. Basically, you're utilizing the dead in order to what? In order to benefit, or in order to take some benefit by them, not benefiting them by making dua for them. You're trying to take some benefit from them, from their actual grave being there, so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer your dua, which is an evil type of belief. Is the people, do they see the difference? You see the difference? It's the difference between standing by the grave thinking that the grave benefits you. That the grave or the deceased benefits you. As you'll find, and I'm going to read the statement of the great Imam Shaykh Uthaymeen, he even says this. He says, يزارون يعني أهل القبور وأصحاب القبور يزارون لأجل أن ينفعوا لا لأجل أن ينتفع بهم. He said this statement. The great Imam Shaykh Muhammad ibn Salih, he mentions this. He says that the people of the dead or inhabitants of the grave, he said they're visited, he says, in order for them to benefit from your dua, not for you to take some benefit for them, take some benefit by them. For them to be benefited by your supplication, not for you to take benefit by them. Is it clear what I'm saying? Are you just saying yes? You understand? You understand? I get you sometimes too. Huh? No, but you understand. I just want to know you guys understand. You understand, Ibrahim? So I say it one more time. The graves, or he says the inhabitants of the grave, the people, the deceased or the dead, he says that they are visited in order for them to benefit, the people who's dead, not to be benefited by them. Is it clear? Not for you to benefit by them, but you to benefit them by making dua for them. So this is what we're discussing here. So I wanted to make that clear because they have to be very daqiq, very, 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 very accurate and very precise in what we're mentioning. So the people won't start to mix up certain things that are legislated. They make a dua for the person at the time when the people walk away after they've been buried. And make a dua that Allah keeps them firm, in which the message of Allah legislated that the person makes dua, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what? Keep them firm. As the hadith comes in Bukhari on the authority of Uthman bin Affan. The Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِذَا وُلُّوا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم استغفروا لأخيكم واسألوا له التثبيت فإنه الآن يسأل. He says, after the people have turned away, and it's heard the steps of their shoes when the person is buried. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a good ending. After everyone has been buried and put under the dirt, they put under that dirt, and people walk away. After that, everything has been finalized. The procedure for the funeral has been done now. It's concluded. The dirt is put on top of the deceased. Everyone walks away. And he says, فَيُسْمَعُ خَفْقَ نِعَالِهِمْ حِينَ وَلَّوْ مُدْبِرِينَ ثم قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم استغفروا لأخيكم واسألوا له التثبيت فإنه الآن يسأل. It says in the narration. He says that is heard the footsteps of their shoes when the people are walking away. The message of Allah said, seek forgiveness for your brother and ask Allah to keep him firm, for verily he's about to be asked. It's about to be asked. The questions in the grave. So in this particular instance, one makes dua for his what? For his brother. Face the Qibla. However, what we're discussing here, kitaab-attawheed, like we said, is believing that the dead has some type of distinguishing factor, whereas one believes that them being next to them or in front of them has some type of benefit. Whereas Allah Ta'ala, as a result of you being there, will answer your supplication or benefit you because of them. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Fine. So what we're saying here, we're discussing, and I'm going to bring the book of Kitab-Al-Janaiz. Something, all right? I have a, the details of what I'm mentioning now, I'm going to bring the book in Kitab-Al-Janaiz. I mentioned this message probably maybe 10 years ago. So Kitab-Al-Janaiz by the great Imam Al-Albani. I'll bring it in next class. Just the brothers just remind me. But anyway, wow, that was 10 years already. Type. So we said in this regard, those details, it's important for one to mention it because I don't want everyone to think that everything is prohibited. So like I said, we have to be very, very accurate and precise when we mention these masail, these matters. So now we won't make things halal, things that is permissible, haram, and make things that are haram, halal. So we have to be very, what they have what they call diqqa or dabt, being very what? Being sharp and being precise and accurate when we're mentioning things. Right. So now, if a person makes dua, in this particular instance, whereas he takes the graves as masajid, does it now, as we said, is it a prerequisite that one builds a structure or actual masjid over the graves? Is that an actual matter? Or is that actually what we're speaking about? That's not a prerequisite. That's part of it, no doubt. But like we talked about, before the other things I want to talk about and discuss, that the message of Allah, as he said in another narration that he prohibited, لا تصلوا إلى القبور ولا تجلسوا عليها. There's another narration that says, do not pray towards a grave and don't sit upon it. Don't pray towards a grave and don't sit upon it. That's also prohibited. Firstly, number one, out of fear that it will lead to people down the road of polytheism, and also, likewise, you'll find in the Kitab al-Sunnah that also we still have respect for the deceased. The respect for them not to humiliate or walk on top of their graves. For still, respect is shown for them even after their death. But however, one is not to what? Commit any type of acts that will now lead down the road of polytheism or paganism, whereas one will be what? Facing towards the grave. Now, what we said, we talked about masajid. We said that it means two things. As we said, masajid means two things, or two affairs. It breaks down to two types, which is the actual building of a structure, which is a masjid. Over the graves, as we know, is prohibited. No doubt. That's clear. Building the actual structure over the graves, whether it be a masjid or whether it be a structure which is performed in it, prayer or ibadah or the like of it, or the opposite, where a person builds the structure and puts the actual grave in the masjid. Both of them are highly prohibited. So those matters are prohibited, whereas, like we said, either to build the masjid over the grave or to build the masjid and put the grave inside of the masjid. To build the masjid, put the grave inside of it. It means both. Also, there's a lot of people think that masjid just means the actual masjid, like what we see now. That's not the meaning. We also know, based upon usul al-thalatha, as which the brothers know, that masjid also means mawdi'u sujud. That also means what? When one prostrates and does the actual prayer. That's also, if you put your face on the ground, you have taken that particular place as a masjid. Even though it's not the actual masjid of what? Of what we see now, what we're sitting in right now. So it can mean both instances, or both affairs, what we're discussing now. It can mean both. It can be, number one, of building the masjid over top of the graves, or building a masjid and putting a grave inside of it, or being in the graveyard and performing acts in affairs of worship, whereas you prostrate or you make sujood. For that also, when you have done that, you have taken that particular place as a masjid. Is it clear? I'm showing what we'll discuss and what we talked about in usul al-thalatha wa anna al-masajida lillah fala tad'u ma'allahi ahada, as we discussed in usul al-thalatha, that the masajid are for Allah. Do not invoke anything along with Allah ta'ala, anything in the least. And that particular ayah, Surah Al-Jinn, we talked about and discussed that it can mean what? It can mean the actual masjid. Do not take the actual places of the graves as masajid. Also, likewise, do not even perform prayer in the vicinity of the of the graves, of the maqabir. Both are prohibited. All these matters are prohibited. For one to make sujood, to one to make ruku'. As we know, as far as janazah or dua, there is no ruku' or sujood involved in it. The salat al-janazah has nothing of those affairs involved in it. It's just dua for the deceased. But now, from one to perform and make ruku' and sujood, especially in the graveyard, that's prohibited. Even with some Ahl Ilm, even mentioned and said that the prohibition of the Messenger of Allah ﷺ necessitates the invalidity of that action. Where the action is even invalid if you was to perform salat in the grave, to the point where even you'll find a lot of Ahl Ilm saying that أن النهي هنا يقتضي الفساد. You'll find the qa'idah usuliyah, which is an usul al-fiqh. You'll find that, which is important also to study. There's certain prohibitions of the Messenger of Allah that when he makes the actual prohibition in certain instances, it necessitates the invalidity of that action. Meaning the action is what? It's invalid. It's rejected. It's not accepted. Then you'll have certain instances where this shows how daqiq, how accurate and precise Ahl Ilm have, where a Prophet ﷺ might prohibit something, but the action outside of it that's not connected to it is still valid, even though the act that the person did was permissible. What do I mean by that? Listen. If you call what they say, the qa'idah is, number one, هَلِ النَّهِ يَقْتَضِي الْفَسَادِ. Does a prohibition from the Messenger of Allah necessitates the invalidity of that action? It depends whether or not the action is connected with the other. Number one, here what we're discussing now. The Messenger of Allah prohibited that a person perform the salah in the graveyards. You'll find in which even the great Imam Shaykh Salih Fawzan clearly mentions, it says that salah in the graveyards necessitates the invalidity of the what? Of the salah. Is it clear? If he performs a salah in the grave, ruku', sujood, what have you, if he does that in the grave, salah is invalid. Type. What is an instance or an example where the actual action is still invalid, but where the person does something impermissible, but he does another act that's outside of it where it's not connected, whereas one part of it is permissible, one part is valid, but the other isn't. Or excuse me, I'm sorry. Whereas the other he did was an act that was what? Unlawful. Just listen. After I mention this example, everybody's going to say it's clear now. Like, person goes and performs Hajj or Umrah without a mahram, a woman. A woman now performs Hajj or Umrah without a mahram. So a woman now that goes on Hajj or Umrah without a mahram, she performs Hajj or Umrah. Is her Hajj and her Umrah invalid? Due to the fact that the Messenger of Allah prohibited traveling without a mahram. The Umrah says it's still valid. So the Messenger of Allah gave a prohibition. A woman's not supposed to travel without a mahram. Right? That's one affair. So she traveled without a mahram to make Hajj or Umrah. So that's something outside. It's another action involved in it. But they're not connected. Even though she did something impermissible. It doesn't invalidate the Hajj or Umrah. Even though she fell into something impermissible and she has to she fell into a major sin, she has to make tawbah for traveling without a mahram. But does that now necessitate the invalidity of her Umrah or Hajj? No, it doesn't. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? That's to show you the importance of the science of usul al-fiqh. Because they study all these matters. It's called usul al-fiqh. I got you. Don't discuss it later. It's good you know. Alhamdulillah, your brain is working. Taib. So that's what we said. Here, but however, in this particular instance, what we're discussing now is performing salat in the graveyard. Does that necessitate هل يقتضي النهي هنا من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فساد هذا العمل? Now that particular action is invalid of the salah itself, we say yes. Here you'll find a lot of majority of them, what Sheikh Salih Fawzan mentioned, said that performing prayer in the graveyard, it validates the salah. It validates it. That's how severe this matter is. To the point will nullify the actual what? The prayer of the person if he performs it in the graveyard. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? G. So now, wow, time's flying. Oh, no. I'll explain it to them. You kind of lost it. Don't worry about it. Just keep it. Fine. So this is what we're saying now. So now to build the masajid, we said number one, it means the structure of the masjid. To build a masjid over the graveyards is prohibited. It's number one. Or, like we said, to build a masjid and put inside of it a what? A grave. Impermissible. And to the point where it will necessitate that one cannot even pray in that masjid. You understand, everyone? I'm going to discuss that. Don't worry. Or a person performing the actual salah in the what? In the graveyard. Because when you have done that, you have taken the grave as a masjid. Due to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, as he said in authentic hadith, which is in Bukhari, جُعِلَتْ لِلْأَرْضِ كُلُّهَا masjid. He said that the whole earth has been made for me a masjid. So anyone from our ummah, it says in the hadith, that reaches him the time of prayer, then let him pray where he is. Because the whole earth, and what was been legislated for the Prophet ﷺ, all of it has been made a what? A masjid. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, Caden? Camden, you with me? Jade. So now let's get back to the narration. Let's read the narration. Who wants to read it? That's the introduction. Fadl. You want to read it, Camden? I keep forgetting you're behind it. I want to hear you. I haven't heard Evie's voice in a while. Here, I didn't see him at first. Fadl. Down, the beginning of chapter 20. Habasha. You guys know what Habasha is? Abyssinia. Is it Abyssinia? Is it Ethiopia now? Or is Abyssinia is considered Ethiopia now? Abyssinia. It's Ethiopia now? G. It says Abyssinia in your book. Abyssinia. Alhamdulillah. Tafadda. Tafadda, Ibi. Ho ho. طيب, listen to the Sahih on the authority of Aisha that Salama is also been related upon our mother Habiba also radiallahu anha. So it's not just Salama. Salama who's also our mother radiallahu anhuma wa ardahuma. So Salama related this, or Aisha related that upon Salama. We'll get inside, there's another narration on the authority of Habiba, also Habiba. طيب. The authority of Aisha, we know Salama was from the wives of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. And who was her name, everyone? Her name was Hind bintu Abi Umayyah. Hind bintu Abi Umayyah al-Makhzumiyya al-Qurashiyya. Al-Makhzumiyya al-Qurashiyya. Our mother, radiyallahu anha ardaha. Salama, as we know, was married to Abu Salama. As we know, there was two migrations. Before the migration of Medina, there was a migration to where, everyone? To Abyssinia. Before the migration of Medina, there was a migration to Abyssinia, which we know currently is in Africa, which is in the region of Ethiopia. That was also, that was the first hijrah in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded Sahaba to what? To go to. In which the king of the Najashi, his name was, he even became Muslim. The Najashi and some of the people in that particular region, they became Muslim. For verily the hijrah was from those who had the actual, or headed the hijrah, the migration at that time, was Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. I'm going to sidetrack you guys. Anyway, when that particular event occurred, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned something about the Christians here, pertaining to the first migration. Because he's talking here about what happened in Abyssinia. He's not talking about what happened in Medina or Mecca. He's talking about something that happened in Abyssinia. It's clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? He's talking about something that took place in the region of Abyssinia. So to notice in the narration, it did not say that they worshipped Allah. Didn't say that. What does it say? Read it again. ذكرت لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كنيسة رأتها. That Salama, she was involved in the first migration. Radiallahu anha. She was in it. She seen a church in the region of Abyssinia. And what was in it of images, sculptures, statues, images of people and the righteous. Until the Messenger of Allah said, أُولَٰئِكِ إِذَا مَاتَ فِيهِمَ الرَّجُلُ الصَّالِحِ. He said, they are the ones that if the person who was righteous died from amongst them, or the slave or the servant that was righteous, they built upon his grave a masjid. And they also made images of him, of them, excuse me. That's the first warning. Notice the Messenger of Allah, what he say? They are the evilest of creation with Allah. So they didn't even what? Did they commit shirk? No. They didn't. But however, they opened up the door to it. They opened up the door to it. So the opening up the door to it could consider the hukm of the people who the Messenger of Allah described them as being what? Evil of creation. That's the reason why you'll find the actual diqqat fahmi al-imam al-mujaddid rahimahullah. You see his accurate, precise fiqh of why he made the title. The severity of the one who worships Allah by the grave of a righteous man. How much more if he actually worshipped him? Is it clear I'm saying, Suhail? Keep you involved. Suhail, you with me? He's with you, trust me. You think he's not. He came out and surprised me today. You just started spitting out stuff. I'm like, whoa. He's with us. So now, like we said in this narration, the Messenger of Allah considered them the most evil of creation, even though they did not fall into shirk, rather they opened up the door to it. Which came as a result of it, the Messenger of Allah described them shirar al-khalq, inda Allah. Why? Because, and then here we say, of what Shaykh al-Islam mentioned and said, that they gather between two fitnas or two trials. Why? They are considered the most evil creation. Due to the fitna of what? Look in your books. The fitna of worshiping of the graves. And building masajid upon them. Ahsant. Building masajid upon them. And also the fitna of those statues and those images that were made out of them. So they did both. And as a result of it, the level of the magnitude of their action reached this what? Reached this level which we're discussing now, of evil and wickedness. So now, we got time, we got about 4 more minutes or 5 more minutes. So we know that, firstly, Salama migrated with her husband, Abu Salama, to Abyssinia. That's number one. So we know that Salama, who's Hind bint Abi Umayyah al-Makhzumiyya al-Qurashiyya, our mother, radiallahu anha, was married before the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam. When her husband died, as we know that the radiallahu anhu Allah, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam married her after her husband died. When we see this, you'll find that Salama also migrated along with her husband to also Abyssinia. Both of them accompanied each other in that migration. And the message of Allah sallallahu أخبرته وهو في مرض موته بما رأت كما في الصحيح. There's another narration. I want everybody to take this in consideration. That she informed the Messenger of Allah sallallahu of what took place at the time of his death. That she informed him that this took place. This narration also took place at the time when he was about to die. That Salama informed of what she saw when she migrated to Abyssinia. So this to let you know that the Sahaba were still talking about affairs pertaining to Tawheed, even though it was at the time of the death of the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam. To let us know how important this matter is, you would think that a person when he's about to die that they're going to be discussing what? Discussing other affairs, which were discussed, no doubt. There was other things that was of concerns when the Messenger of Allah was about to die. But you would think that this thing would be what? From those affairs that wouldn't be discussed. Rather, it was from the affairs that were still what? Being emphasized. And its importance was being what? Emphasized. Of the importance of it. Right before his death, the Messenger of Allah was having fear that the people would maybe take his masjid or his place of his death, of what would happen with the Jews and the Christians, they would do it with him. As taking his grave as a place of worship. So that's the reason why he was what? Highly warning against it. Not to do it. Warning the Ummah to shut all the doors of polytheism and paganism off. That's the reason why, but right before his death, he emphasized on this matter. Out of fear that no one take his masjid or his place of his death as a place of worship. In order for the affair of monotheism to be preserved, to be maintained in every aspect. Is it clear what I'm saying so far, everyone? Jade, we'll stop here. Trying to keep it a little bit, because I know the time's getting late now. But we'll stop here, inshallah. We'll continue Sunday, inshallah. And don't forget, brothers, I need my kitaab-attawheed by the great Imam al-Albani. I want to bring it in and read something to you guys. It's important. I want to really read it. But we'll stop here. Kitab-al-Jinaza. It's called Kitab-al-Janaiz. Janaiz, that's the plural. Janaiz by the great Imam Muhammad Nasruddin al-Albani rahimahullah. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Any questions about the lesson? تفضل.